wonder. She has touched 24/7. Well, that's slow. No, I'll just look in the direction. That's just because my grandma taught me to pay.
Plus, I haven't even got my combination.
That's rough.
No, it was a better way to get our attention without calling our name. No, that's because Aaron was pissed off that accident.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I think I'll hold her loosely somewhere that's in the street. More definitely yeah.
Hey, Mr. Dudding, Jonathan Miller. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Hey, I'm Bob Hutton.
Yeah, I'm here for this. I'm part of the Little Kanawha Reading Series. We haven't talked or anything. I've just been following Jason.
Write your name on that little drawing.
I recognize that young man from the back of the book here. Okay. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. So, yeah. Oh, you guys did a lot of research on this.
Can we do that for you?
Yeah. We need another.
I've already put mine in.
Yes, sir.
Put your name in. Yeah, put your name in. Yeah, it's the thing. He has just disappeared. Oh, yeah, the whole one.
Not possible.
Yeah, no, I've been here for this way.
Oh. No.
Like the sign in for the drawing.
graduate some books.
Anyone else signing into the drawing?
Yeah, I can always get, I can add to it.
Maybe 2:35.
Oh, you were up there.
All right, guys, I just want to be conscious of everyone's time. It's getting pretty close, or a little after 4 o'clock, so I'd like to get us moving along here. My name is Jason Gum. I'm the library director and archivist here at Glenville State, and this is a very special event for me. I mean, I love them all, but this is something that really is something I'm extremely interested in and have been throughout my entire life. I grew up in a time probably, a little bit before the internet. When I was just a young man's age, I was very enthused about these stories that I'd hear, from a lot of the older folks in the area. I actually grew up near Flatwoods, within walking distance of where the one of the sightings of maybe something he may talk about in a little while about the Flatwoods Green Monster. Always really fascinated me talking to the folks that were a part of that event, and I've kind of carried that through me all my life. When I came here as a student, 18 years old, some of the first books I read were the books that we had in this collection on what is called today cryptids. It wasn't exactly the term, I don't think, back then, but a lot of that interesting stuff. But today we're lucky enough to have a Glenville State College at the time graduate with us by the name of George Dudding. He graduated in 1973 here. I've came to know George over the last couple of years. I met him, it was probably a couple of years ago. You were in here doing research in the West Virginia room.
Yes.
And I think we looked over, I turned him on to a few of the archival collections on things like the Ghost of Sis Lynn and the stories that have taken place here and some of the primary source material we have. And then I had the pleasure of having him here over the 50-year grads last year, seeing how it was the 2023 50-year grads of the 1973 graduates. George has authored over 60 different books on these sorts of subject matters. These things, as I mentioned, Sis Lynn, Bigfoot, Mothman, the Flatwoods Green Monster, and other subjects that deal with cryptids and the paranormal. He actually has degrees in physics and mathematics. I believe he taught math for several years. Beyond the degree here at Glenville, he has a degree from WVU also. But please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. George Dudding. He's going to talk about his work.
Okay, I finished up here in 1973 after graduating with specialties in physics, mathematics, and general science. And I was told that I'd be able to, get any job I wanted to or whatever, pretty much. And however, when it come time to applying for all these jobs, I applied for a bunch of places, and somehow never ended up getting located exactly where I wanted at. And as a matter of fact, it seemed like there was a demand, but when I went out to get these jobs, it was more difficult than I thought, because you had to have some special connection to get a job. And this is still going on today, this kind of thing. But I happened to be passing through Roane County down there, and I stopped in down there to see. I didn't really have time to be hunting for a job. I was on the way to a construction job in Fayette County. And so I stopped down there, and they said, we don't have anything, They said, here, fill out an application and bring it back. Well, I went out, took the application, went out the door, went to my vehicle, and somebody comes running out and said, hey, come back here, they want to talk to you a minute. So they said, we just had a guy resign 10 minutes ago. And so I said, okay, I'll sign up for that job, maybe try to get that. And they said, somebody came in and said, well, we got another resignation. So it was 2 jobs. So I ended up teaching down at a place called Walton for a while. And then from there I went to Spencer High School in Spencer, and then from there I jumped to Roane County High School, where I spent about 15 years there. So I put in about 36 years teaching mathematics and physics. I even taught mathematics at night for 2 years for Glenville here. Anyhow, my wife passed away of cancer 12 or 13 year battle with cancer, and she died in 2012. And after that happened, a lot of times I'd be out in the community, and people would say, I was from Point Pleasant, of course, I grew up there. I was born there in 1950. And so when I was in high school, we had this incident dealing with the Mothman down there. And I knew a whole bunch of the people, and I knew all about that incident and knew a lot of the people involved. And then the following year, about 13 months after that, the Silver Bridge collapsed. I was there that night. I was there about 45 minutes after it collapsed, watching the rescue operation and so forth like this. So I come to know quite a bit about some of those things. And so people were always asking me to tell them about Mothman or tell them about the Silver Bridge disaster and all that kind of thing. And even my first few days here at Glenville State College, University, in '69, I had somebody came to my room and said, there's 2 or 3 people, and they said, can you tell us something about that Mothman we just discovered? You were from Point Pleasant. So I told them the story about it, and they handed me a magazine, and they said, you can have this magazine. It's got a story about it in it. And then they said, we have our own little incident that happened up here at Flatwoods a few years ago. And in 1969, a few years ago, wasn't very far back to 1952. And so I always thought I would work on a project, write something on some of these things. In 2013, somebody said, why don't you write these stories up? So I wrote some books. And how I started on this, the idea was I was going to just make some kind of a book that was simple, more like a pamphlet, and use my computer to print it and staple it up myself. Well, you can take 8 sheets of paper like this, flat out, okay, throw them in the computer, and it can print these pages on front, left and right side, and back, left and right side. Print these things all out, and the printer could spit out maybe 25 copies of a book pretty quick. And then I'd lay them down, and I'd also print out one of these back on cardstock. Lay those things down like this, and put a long reach stapler on here to staple these things. And a woman named Liz Lamack, she's a good friend of mine. We hung out together. She was an entertainer from Nashville. She used to be on the Grand Ole Opry and was on a show called Hee Haw and some other things like that. Good-looking person. She's even in her pictures in some of these books. She was in on this with me too because she was doing this stuff. So we would staple up these books, then fold them, roll this down, and this is all I wanted to do. I didn't want to do anything else. And I took these to the Mothman Festival and all kinds of festivals and sold these things. Right here's one on the Devil Monkey. Here's one on the Kelly Hopkins UFO incident. I have them on, okay, there's a Sicilian one, Silver Bridge tragedy. But anyhow, I had lots of these, big boxes of these things. I was selling them. And someone said, why don't you get somebody to print these for you? So I started working on that. And pretty soon, I was turning out books like this. And John, who is right over here somewhere, right back there, he helps a lot on the editing of these books inside and formatting and things like that. And he also designs covers on these books. And there's several of them here. He designed all these covers on all these books. So this thing got to be a big thing. I started cranking out more and more books. One of the books I wrote on, and we have Glenville State College is furnishing 10 of these right here. We're going to have a raffle. The raffle will be off for a while. And one of the books I wrote on was Sicilian Goes to Glenville State College, Glenville State University. And so anyhow, since this is a book reading, I'm going to read something out of that book. I don't know how many people have read that book already. Sicilian Goes to Glenville State College, okay. All right, I pulled something out of that book to read, and of course my eye's been having a lot of trouble. major eye infection happened right after a trip from in the south a year ago. And I've been battling that at WVU Medicine. I was driving up there every day from Spencer. We still don't have it whipped. But yeah, I've had a lot of trouble seeing, so I've got this all, I can't even see the book. Okay, that book is Sicilian Ghost of Glenville State University. The time was late fall of 1972, and the place was Glenville State College, a prominent center of higher education located in the heart of Glenville, West Virginia. To the local community, it is known as the Lighthouse on the Hill. At the time, the United States was still immersed in the turmoil of an unpopular, dragged-out, ongoing war in Vietnam. Only a few months earlier, on June 17, 1972, President Richard M. Nixon had authorized a break-in at Democratic National Committee headquarters located in an office complex at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. That incident set off a major news media frenzy. Things remained peaceful at the college, a place essentially secluded from the outside world. On one particular Friday evening, 3 of Glenville State College's academic icons were engaged in a late-night covert operation, of which they would later jokingly refer to as Verona Gate. During an unsanctioned wiretap operation in the basement of a stately brick building known as Verona Maple Hall, a woman's dormitory located on the upper end of the Glenville State College campus, the highly notorious threesome had a creepy paranormal experience. The event that transpired would plunge them into a shadowy mystery which would continue to baffle them for the rest of their normal lives. The whole affair on that eerie night had come about partly because of a lack of something to do on the weekend, and the rumors circulating around that dormitory phone users had been hearing strange ghostly voices on the publicly shared hallway telephones, which they were obligated to use if they intended to use a telephone at all. Those were the days when the now popular cellular phones and smartphones, to which young people are seriously addicted, did not exist. Frankly, in my opinion, they were better off. The main reason, however, for the activity that evening was to eliminate an alternating current, AC hum, that was plaguing one of WGSC's radio carrier current transmitters that was strategically located in the basement of Verona Maple Hall. The caper in which the dynamic trio had become intensely engaged that evening had been going along quite smoothly, as they expertly used a Western Electric Company model 1011B telephone lineman's butt set to tap into the terminals of a Bell Atlantic PBX that was located in the basement of the elegant dormitory facility. Engaging the electronic skills of one of their ingenious members, the trio also was able to connect a Wallensack 3M model 1520 reel-to-reel tape recorder into the system using a patch cord configured with a 1/4-inch audio plug on one end and 2 alligator clips on the other. Then, using the butt set and the tape recorder simultaneously, they were able to listen to and record any sounds which might take place on any particular telephone line. The purpose of the recording was to compare with previous readings to see if improvements were made. Our main business was to find the dedicated telephone line from the radio station to the transmitter and fix the annoying hum. Since it was late at night on the weekend, all business operations of the college were shut down, and the only phone traffic would be that which was going in and out of the 3 campus dormitories, Verona Maple Hall, Lewis Bennett Hall, and Women's Hall, later renamed Pickens Hall. These were stately multi-story brick structures located on the main college campus and served as student dormitories back in those days. The first 45 minutes of the operation were pretty much uneventful, with the exception of a few interesting conversations picked up from hallway phones, which were conveniently located on different floors of each dormitory. It was then that one of the group participants thought they heard a strange-sounding woman's voice crying over the earpiece of the butt set. The voice seemed to be crying for help. The trio took turns listening to the strange voice, and one of the braver ones finally had the nerve to talk back to her and inquire as to her location. Despite some static on the line, they were able to hear what they believed to be the words, "I am right here." When she was asked if she could give her name, she replied and was understood to say that she was Sarah Lynn. The phone interaction ended when there came from out of nowhere the echoes of a shrill, screaming voice and a low, wailing moan. The scary vocalizations seemed to resonate from the far end of the Verona Maple Hall basement. Chills ran down the spines of the adventurers as they momentarily tried to determine the source of the shrieking voice. Unsure of what had been unleashed upon them, the apprehensive group decided that they had better leave the premises, the sooner the better. The butt set and tape recorder were quickly disconnected, the door of the PBX cabinet was slammed shut, and the cover was secured with the quick turn of a screwdriver. It is not necessary to say that the group made a fast exit, and the last words heard from one in the lead were, "Let's find the LCM and the LCD and get the HELL out of here." Later that night, back at their headquarters, the Verona Gate trio listened to the tape recordings repeatedly. Strangely, the main part of the recorded phone conversation was there, but the recording of the Sarah Lynn conversation was one-sided. In other words, the voices of the group members who spoke to Sarah Lynn were loud and clear, with the exception of some static, but the voice of Sarah Lynn was missing. This seems to be common in paranormal events such as these. Voices of ghosts, which were heard by those experiencing them, their presence, do not show up on tape recordings. Then there is the reverse situation when voices appear on a recording but were not directly heard by those who were present. It is due to this last phenomenon that tape recorders and digital recorders are a handy tool, quite commonly used by paranormal investigators when searching out the presence of a ghost. In the world of paranormal investigator, it is known as an EVP or electronic voice phenomena. On the following Monday, one member of the illustrious trio, who was well connected with college personnel, decided to speak to someone and find out more information about the name of Sarah Lynn. After paying a short visit to the administration building, he was able to speak with one of the secretaries that worked in the outer office. He inquired as to whether she might know of a student or anyone else by that name, Sarah Lynn. In the following moments, he learned more than what he had bargained for. He was informed that Sarah Lynn was the name of a local resident from the distant past who was buried in a local cemetery located right behind Lewis Bennett Hall. Furthermore, it was learned that, according to a local legend, Sarah Lynn's ghost was said to haunt that cemetery and a few of the nearby buildings. To many of the college students and local residents, she became known simply as Sis Lynn. Throughout the years, there have been numerous stories of her ghostly appearance in Clark Hall, Verona Maple Hall, Lewis Bennett Hall, and various other places on campus. From what we could determine, it seemed that her legend had continued to grow as the years had passed. During the following weeks, the Verona Gate trio often met at the Pioneer Center, which was the name that had been given to the Glenville State College Student Union building. They discussed the whole Sis Lynn ghost thing over and over again, and even walked to the old cemetery late at night to see if they could conjure up some kind of ghostly activity. Sometimes they even wore improvised ghost costumes in an effort to lure the ghost of Sis Lynn from the beyond. After many weeks, without any newly occurring events, the group abandoned their efforts and channeled their energy towards more productive activities, such as studying for final exams, hanging out with girls, and drinking beer at a local establishment known as the House of the Rising Sun. The ghostly experience was not discussed again by the group for many years. At some point in time, the reel of tape which contained the half-sided ghostly conversation went missing. It is believed that someone in the college radio station, WGSC, may have recorded the music over top of it. So, for the Verona Gate trio, many years would pass before they would take time out to once again recall their strange paranormal experience that night on the lower level of Verona Maple Hall. After graduation from their rigorous fields of studies at Glenville State College, each of them had to get on with their lives, which became more and more complicated over time. For a period of time spanning over 4 decades, they often ventured back to Glenville State College. They walked the campus and sometimes stopped at the lawn where Verona Maple Hall once stood until its fateful demolition almost 30 years ago. To this day, several questions still lurk in their minds. Just who was this restless spirit that haunted various buildings on the campus of Glenville State College? What was her story? Why did she continue to arise from the grave and allow herself to be known? Did she have a mission? Okay. That's just a small part of that book right there. draw names on some of these right now. Let's have somebody draw some names out here. Who wants to draw them?
I'll drop the names.
Yeah, okay.
I came all late, so I'll be
Oh,
participating.
did you fill in the thing?
No, I'm okay.
Just go ahead and.
See the fact that you just described my office building. It's okay.
There's right here. You don't want to be now first before you get in here. Don't you want the drawing?
I'll be okay.
Oh.
All right, fine, I'll make it
I want,
fair.
if you're here professional, you don't have to.
I don't want to pick mine.
No problem. No problem.
I'm trying to be like,
I'll make sure I fix up so you don't fall.
literally describing.
Okay, she's gonna draw a name out.
Jordan. That's me.
You want to draw a name out?
That was with us anymore.
We have Dr. Jonathan Mitten.
Is that right? Women's door.
Across from Chris Clark Hall on that long.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Looks like it. Alright. I just literally drew my own names, but that.
Did you really?
I did. Well, if I was cheating, I wouldn't have. Blah, 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 blah.
Here, I'll throw mine over too.
Margie?
Yay!
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not like y'all are hurting for books. English department.
Well, for right now, we're rolling out of the afternoon.
There's actually two of the real original posters from the reward. The reward posters are currently on eBay for $40 a piece.
Wow.
I can reproduce them. I mean, I have scans.
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. Draw. Okay. All right. We'll get back here and draw some more here in a little bit. Okay. Let's see here. Something local here. Let's see this one. This is one of our recent books right here. When UFOs Ruled the Skies over West Virginia. I wrote on this book. My son back there, John, wrote on the book. We're co-authors on this, and he designed covers. And this book, there's a story in this book that occurred not too far from here, but a long time ago, 100 years ago. It's a UFO incident. And another thing about some of these books that are laying right here, Glenville State College purchased these books. 10 of them to give away here tonight, and that's what we're doing. However, there are some books laying here that I brought along to hold up and illustrate what kind of work I do. And if somebody wants to purchase those, they're actually, I'll sell them if they want them. From the book, when UFOs Ruled the Skies over West Virginia, from that book, there is this story that occurred not too far from here. As a matter of fact, right out here to Hayes City, you take the road towards Burnsville, and then just keep right on going into Braxton County. This was 100 years ago, it just so happens. Men in Black Forerunner, location, Braxton County, date, May 1924. Okay? Airplanes were a rare sight in the skies during the 1920s, particularly over West Virginia. So it would be an especially big event if one were to crash. In May of 1924, a farmer outside of Gem, West Virginia, informed news reporter John Cole of a purported airplane crash within a forested area. Gem, whose name is derived from an early pioneer citizen, G.E. McCoy, is an unincorporated community located on State Route 5 in Braxton County, about 2 miles south of Burnsville and 7.5 miles north of Flatwoods. It was known as Coger Bluff or Coger Station in earlier days. Does anybody know where that place is? Okay. As the farmer described the so-called plane to Cole, it became evident that this was no ordinary aircraft. The plane lacked wings, did not make any noise, and was unusually large, as big as a battleship. Shortly thereafter, a search party, including Cole and the local sheriff, was informed and began scouring the woods in a deliberate and systematic manner. In no more than a few hours, they stumbled upon the wreck in a clearing. We weren't the first ones there, though. There were already 5 or 6 men in the clearing, some dressed in black business suits. Others were dressed in coveralls. As described above, that was a newspaper clipping. As described above, Cole witnessed men dressed similar to the infamous Men in Black, or MIB, a term coined in later years. They were wearing black business suits and attire complete with neckties. Oddly, though, some were donning some type of shiny coveralls of a strange color, while conversing rapidly in a foreign language. These strange men were approximately 5 feet tall and possessed the characteristics of humans from Asian descent. As if the story wasn't strange enough, one of the men began to speak English and relayed that no one was hurt, everything was all right, and that he would call the sheriff later to make a complete report. As to the craft, Cole observed that it seemed to have the fuselage of a modern plane with windows, but lacked wings, propellers, or a tail. Additionally, he estimated it to be at least 75 feet in length. Unknown to Cole at the time, he made one potentially fatal mistake. He spotted a fragment from the UFO that he referred to as a little thingamajig lying on the ground and decided to put it in his pocket to keep. Tired from the day's adventures, he went back to his home in Weston and went straight to bed. However, at 3 a.m., he was awakened by a pounding on his door by someone wearing what looked to be a U.S. Army uniform, though the wearer of said clothes appeared to be one of the foreigners from the prior day. "You picked up something today," he said. "We need it back." Grabbing the thingamajig from his coat pocket, Cole offered, "Is this what you mean?" Silence followed as the stranger snatched the metallic object and scurried off without uttering a word. After pondering what happened over the course of a few days, Cole returned to the woods and the clearing where the UFO had landed. But it was completely empty. The only trace of any evidence left was the state of the grass and bushes, as they were notably crushed where the craft had previously been. After this surprise visit by what appeared to be an Army officer, he thought it best to not pursue things further. Puzzled by the case for years, Cole would later tell his story to John Keel in 1967, the reading of which can be found in Keel's book, The Eighth Tower, or the British edition of the text, The Cosmic Question. This was also in newspapers and so forth. But that's a story out of the book, When UFOs Ruled the Skies Over West Virginia. Let's see what else I have here. Okay. You're all familiar with the Flatwoods Monster incident up here. Up here, Flatwoods. That book looks like this right here. Forgot what year I wrote that book. 2013. Wrote that book. It's one of my early books. I took something out of that book to read. The Flatwoods Monster, Evening of the Incident. On the evening of September 12, 1952, Sheriff Robert L. Carr and Deputy Burnell J. Long of Braxton County were at their office in Sutton, West Virginia. It had been a routine day without any excitement. That is, until one fateful moment. Suddenly, the peace and quiet was interrupted by the ringing of the telephone, prompting Deputy Long to answer and speak with a very excited caller. Woodrow Thomas Eagle, an automotive mechanic from Strange Creek, was the caller and wanted to report that something had crash-landed in Braxton County along the Elk River, about 13 miles southwest of Flatwoods near Gasaway. The caller specifically stated that he had been hitchhiking and had just caught a ride when he saw what he thought to be a Piper Cub airplane crossing the sky above him. If it wasn't an airplane, then Eagle thought that it was some other type of brightly lit or even burning object. The location of the crash was a wooded hillside located just across the Elk River from the community of Frametown. The motorist that picked him up had driven him to the nearest telephone so he could report the incident. Deputy Long immediately spoke with Sheriff Carr and related the information given to him by the caller. Believing that there might be a serious emergency, they both responded to that area to conduct an investigation and make a report. Upon their arrival on the scene, the sheriff and his deputy checked out the area, speaking with several witnesses before going up the hillside among the trees and brush to see if they could find the site of the crash. Nothing was found, but residents of that area knew that something had hit the ground, whether it was a meteorite or a plane. Meanwhile, not far away, back at Flatwoods, another strange sighting was about to occur. Something was about to happen which would strike terror and fear into the citizens and have future effects on each of their lives. They were about to enter the strange world of what might be called the Twilight Zone. And this was a little while later that those boys in a schoolyard playing football saw something fly across the sky, flying saucer, and saw it land on a hilltop, and they could see the light. So they ran home, and one of them, a couple of them there had, their mother was at the Lemon home. She was the Lemon's daughter, Kathleen May. They went up on the hill, and that's when they confronted that craft setting off in Meta, and then this 8 to 10 foot monster that was standing near a tree. And that was the beginning of the Flatwoods Monster incident right there. After that Flatwoods incident took place, on the following night, George and Edith Snitowski were coming from Ohio, and they were on the way to New York because they lived in New York and they'd been up in Ohio. He'd been up there visiting a relative, and somebody told me that something was wrong with my story. They said, your story in your book makes no sense. Now, I want to hear this one. They told me that my write-up in the book made absolutely no sense. They said, why would somebody from Ohio be driving through Gasaway and Frametown on the way to New York State? They were going to Queens or somewhere like that in New York City. And they said, because you would go by interstate. Okay. And they said, that's where the flaw is in your book. And the person said, this book is basically BS. And it's hard to deal with somebody like that, too. But there was no interstates, as you well know. In 1952, when did they start building those interstates? I know when I was in college here in the 70s, they were coming down from Fairmont, building an interstate coming this way. So let's say 52, 62, 72. That'd be 20 years. So it was 20 years later, and I know it was even later than that when the interstate reached Charleston, Interstate 79. So, you know, you tried to explain that to people, you know. Back then you had to use what highways were available. Okay. So that's how that worked. But anyhow, Edith and George Snitowski were driving along the road near Frametown, and they were actually on the way to Gasaway and then on to Sutton. And they were going to stay in Sutton. Something happened. All of a sudden, their car engine stalled right in the middle of the highway. And everything was dead, wouldn't start. George Snitowski got out and tried to figure out what was wrong, and it wasn't successful. But then, not very far away, they spotted some kind of ship setting down over the bank beside the road. It was glowing. And he wondered what that was. Right there is what stalled his engine. So he decided to walk that way, but his wife screamed at him that there was something behind him. And he turned around, and there was a creature was behind him, advancing on him. It chased him back, basically chased him back to his car. He jumped inside, and they locked the doors. It walked around the car, checked things out, put its hand on the hood of the car, and it burnt a V-shaped handprint in the paint on the hood of the car somehow. Well, the thing then left and went back to the ship and got in the ship and took off. Well, they were shook up, but then the car started. So they drove on up through Gasaway and drove on into Sutton. And the next morning, they were trying to decide whether or not to report what had happened, but they said they didn't want somebody thinking they were crazy and get arrested or something by some, you know, deputy or something. So they didn't say much, but a man at the filling station made a comment about, you know, something about their car and said, "What did that to the hood of your car?" And pointed out a big handprint burned the hood of the car. So that's how that happened. Meanwhile, up in Flatwoods, you know, they'd had the whole incident where the boys went on the hill and seen this UFO and the monster that drove it. That's what I would say. Now, one of the other books that I wrote on was this, Tale of the Mason County Mothman. People started saying, you know, they'd like to know more about Mothman and Silver Bridge. So I wrote this book on the Silver Bridge and this book on the Mason County Mothman. And this tells the story exactly as I recall it back in 1966 when it happened. And most of the people in here, if I wasn't personal friends of them, I knew them like I might, you know, like you might know some people around the campus here. You might know who they are and everything. Maybe you don't talk to them all the time. Well, some of these people I didn't talk to, but some of them I have. And so some of them I went to school with, from grade school on up to high school, that were witnesses. So I wrote this book, and then people wanted Silver Bridge, and I wrote this book right here, these two books. Now, I pulled something out of those books, and of course I'm just reading part of this. This is what happened the night of the first Mothman sighting in Point Pleasant. And this is how the book goes. Mothman sighted. At this point in this book, we're finally getting to the part readers want to hear. The part about Mothman, the original debut of the mysterious winged creature, was not at Point Pleasant. Instead, the first appearance may have been 620 miles southwest of Point Pleasant, near the unincorporated town of Scott, Mississippi. On September 1, 1966, Mrs. James Eichert, along with other citizens of that locality, saw an unknown entity which they described as a winged man flying about in the sky. There were also 2 sightings in West Virginia which occurred before the one at Point Pleasant. In the late fall of 1966, several strange sightings occurred in the Kanawha County town of Clendenin, West Virginia, and the Doddridge County town of Salem, West Virginia. On November 12, 1966, Kenneth Duncan and 4 other men were digging a grave at a cemetery near Glenville, West Virginia. Suddenly, a large brown human being took off from some nearby trees and flew over them. Those witnesses said it did not look like a bird, but that it appeared to be a man with wings. 2 nights later, on November 14, 1966, at around 10:30 p.m., Merle Partridge, also known as Newell Partridge, was at his home in Salem, West Virginia. It was getting to be late at night when he began experiencing a strange interference with the picture on his television. The television also began to make a strange whining sound. Simultaneously, Partridge could hear his dog barking outside. He went outside and was amazed to see some type of big machine, or UFO, with collared, flashing lights, sitting in a field next to his barn. Nearby was a large creature with big red glowing eyes. His dog Bandit, a large German Shepherd, took off in pursuit of the red-eyed monster. Partridge tried to call the dog back without any success. He became very nervous and immediately went back inside to load his shotgun. During the rest of the night, things remained calm, but when Partridge tried to find his dog the next morning, it was nowhere to be found. A couple of days later, he picked up a newspaper and read about an incident which had taken place 86 air miles away, near Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A similar creature with large red eyes had been sighted, and a dead dog was seen lying next to the roadway. He was sure that it was the same creature he had confronted in the field next to his barn, and he felt sure that the dog was Bandit. Merle Partridge used a partially fictitious name, Newell Partridge, to avoid undesired attention by curious individuals and investigators trying to seek out more information, and that name is used in many accounts pertaining to the above incident. According to the newspapers, terror and suspense had come to the Mason County town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Stories about the sightings of a mysterious monster had begun to roll in, and there was no telling how long the episode was going to continue. I can still remember many of the stories as they were told by fellow classmates at Point Pleasant High School. I followed the stories closely in the Point Pleasant Register, and my friends saved me their copies of the Athens Messenger and the Herald Dispatch whenever events were covered in these papers. In the rest of this book, I will relate what happened almost 50 years ago when Mason County residents were plunged head-on into a mystery, one which struck fear into the hearts of some and left a permanent mark on the community. Even to this day, there are many unanswered questions about the sequence of events surrounding the appearance of the Mothman and the other encounters in the days that followed. On Tuesday night, November 15, 1966, 2 married couples were socializing together in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and they were looking for something to occupy their time that evening. Roger Scarberry, Linda Scarberry, Steve Mallett, and Mary Mallett decided to drive around town to check out a few places where their friends were known to hang out. At around 11:30 p.m., they decided to take a ride up State Route 62, known to the locals as the Ohio River Road, to engage in a local sport known as chasing parkers. Their destination was 5 miles north of Point Pleasant at the old TNT area. On that fateful night, they were riding in a 1957 Chevrolet, possibly powered by a 265 cubic inch or 283 cubic inch V8 engine, driven by Roger Scarberry. In those days, the 1956 Chevrolet was a popular car with teenagers and was well known for its use in amateur drag racing. Upon their arrival in the TNT area, they turned to the right off of State Route 62 and they drove about 6/10 of a mile down Fairground Road, also designated as County Route 12. When they arrived at the Mason County Fairgrounds, they turned left onto a gravel road which runs along the western border of the fairgrounds and drove another 270 yards to the entrance of the old North Power Plant. At that point, they turned to the right and drove through an open gate onto the old abandoned industrial property. Without any thoughts of possible danger, they climbed out of their car to take a look around, but only for a moment. It was then that an eerie feeling swept over them as they realized that they were not alone. A strange, scary creature emerged from a nearby door at the front of the power plant. The being was at least 6 or 7 feet tall with huge wings, and it had 2 large red glowing eyes. There was something particularly unusual about those eyes. Not only were they glowing bright red, but they seemed to be located in the chest area of the creature. The 4 adventurers, who were scared out of their wits, scrambled back into their car. Steve and Mary Mallet, with panic in their voices, expressed the need to get a move on, and Linda Scarberry anxiously agreed. With Roger Scarberry at the wheel and with tires spinning, the 1957 Chevy was skillfully backed out into the narrow side road. The scary creature had begun to make some strange humming and screeching sounds. Suddenly it slightly lifted its wings and took off without flapping them as it flew vertically upward into the air. The party sped back down the little gravel side road, turned back on the fairground road, and raced back out the straight stretch to the main highway. It was then that they realized something very frightening and scary. The creature was in pursuit and was managing to keep up with them as they turned south on the State Route 62. The flying creature flew behind and above them while being able to keep up with them as the powerful 1957 Chevy reached speeds near 100 miles per hour. In the vicinity of a huge farm on the outskirts of Point Pleasant, known as the C.C. Lewis Farm, the creature apparently broke off pursuit, but then it was suddenly seen standing beside the road. The occupants of the car also observed a dead dog lying along the road at the point where the creature was standing. That's from this Tale of Mason County Mothman right here. Now later on, after writing that book, a couple of years or so ago here, and I can't remember all the dates, 2020, just like that, coming up on 40 years. I wrote this book called Mothman Territory, History and High Strangeness. And, you know, some people thought that maybe this was all about Mothman, but what this is about, it's a place I call Mothman Territory, and that is Point Pleasant and Mason County area. There's a lot of weird stuff happens down there. For some reason, I don't know, the place is engulfed in mystery. And so I wanted to write about some of those things. And this is the book where I did it. And the person that I mentioned earlier that originally started working with me on the churning out of books like this and so forth, she had written a lot of her books. She wrote the foreword to it, and she's pictured in the front right there. She's pictured right there in the front. It's in Nashville. But anyhow, there's a lot of things in here. I began this book by discussing superstring theory, the beginning of time, and the formation of the universe and solar systems, right down to the Earth's formation, and Mason County and its geologic formation. I discussed that. Then I go on to White Man Arrived, early history, Battle of Point Pleasant, murder of Chief Cornstalk, founding of Mason County, the lost colony of Mason County and all that, and some of the famous people, including Mad Ann Bailey, Daniel Boone, General Albert Gallatin Jenkins, John McCausland, and Captain William Gunn. All those people are in here. It's a history book. I talk about all the kind of transportation on the Ohio and Kanawha River by boats, railroad systems, roads and highways, communities on the Ohio River, communities on the Kanawha River. Strange streets and roads in town. Madison Avenue is a weird road. Huntington Road, stuff happens up and down it all the time. Ohio River Road, Potter's Creek Road, Fairground Road, all this weird stuff happens there. Abandoned installations like Marietta Manufacturing and Point Pleasant Depot. And I talk about all kinds of historical sites. Mark Twain's ancestral home is there because some of his family members owned a farm there. And there's all kinds of things. There's Indian mounds, we call them, burial sites with skeletons of giants found inside those things. Then I talk about all kinds of strange creatures that have been seen down there, like Bigfoot, something called the sheep squatch, and Jericho Road man bears, whatever those were, and things like that. And I talk about all the haunted places, like down at Crab Creek, Maymore Mansion, Bruce Chapel and Graveyard, a whole lot of places like that. Haunted Lincoln State Hospital. Another thing that makes that place strange is the big power plants. Phillips Bourne, Mountaineer, and Cadro Creek power plant. They generate a lot of electricity, and there's a lot of strange things happening in the areas where those power plants are at. I talk about people like Gray Barker in here, and Mary Hire and her experience with UFOs and the Men in Black. I talk about that. Then I talk about the history of the TNT area, the West Virginia Ordnance Works, and then we lead up to the Mothman incident. And then there's some ghost stories in here, disasters like barge explosions at Marietta Manufacturing, and the courthouse exploded. There's a strange story about that. A woman killed her baby that was only like a few months old, and then took it out and buried it out in the cornfield. Husband came home, somebody kidnapped the baby. Sheriff's Department searched and found this disturbed ground, dug it up, found the baby wrapped in a blanket. They arrested her, put her in jail. Later that night, her husband brought a big, huge duffel bag full of dynamite and walked in, and he began dictating to them, what he wanted done. He wanted in the cell with her. What he was going to do was going to kill her. He wanted to get in the cell with her, and the deputy on duty thought it was all funny, because he went up there and unlocked the cell and let him in there and slammed it and locked it, and he was laughing about it because he had him trapped in there. He went back downstairs and called the sheriff and said, "Guess who I got locked up upstairs?" And he said, "Who?" And he told him. So all these law enforcement agents came. They went in the place. That guy took that shotgun, stuck it in that duffel bag, blowed the whole end out of the courthouse. The jail cells from the third floor fell all the way down through. The second floor took out those floors and went clear to the basement. A bunch of people was killed. Sheriff's deputies killed. Sheriff was killed. State troopers had arms and legs blown off. All kinds of gross stuff happened during that incident. They took the baby and buried her at the Oak Grove Church, and the mother's buried right beside the baby. The mother that killed the baby is buried right beside the baby. And the husband that blew the courthouse up is buried right beside them. They're all three buried there at the Oak Grove Church graveyard. I wrote all that stuff in here. Even the James gang, Jesse James, haunted that area. The man that invented the Jeep, that's Mason County also. And a whole bunch of different things is in this book. But everything weird that's happened in one place is in that book. Everything I can think of, and including the Mothman. Now, in this book writing business, occasionally, I research myself on the internet to see what people are saying. Okay, let me see, what was it? You get some good stuff and you get some bad stuff too. But I was fooling around on the internet researching for information, and all of a sudden my name popped up on a site called The Southern Spirit Guide, dated February 8, 2021. There was an article about the ghastly bell ringer and bride, and they were talking about St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, the oldest religious building in the city, constructed in 1752, between 1752 and 1761, and located next to the church is an old graveyard. And the article tells about legends of a ghost who rings the church bells, and also the ghost of Harriet Mackey, a bride who roams through the church graveyard. The graveyard is also the final resting place of some of the great people, including two signers of the U.S. Constitution, Charles Coatsworth Pinckney and John Rutledge. They're buried in that graveyard. And John and I spent a bunch of time in those graveyards, ghost hunting them with equipment and junk, going through and carrying our meters and things, trying to locate. Anyhow, I was reading this story, and all of a sudden, in the end of this article I was reading it says, recently I came across the account of a paranormal investigator, George Dudding, and his son, who crept into the church's graveyard after dark in 2018. The pair made their way into the graveyard by way of a back gate that had been carelessly left open. After producing various pieces of investigative equipment, they swept the site for any paranormal activity. While he listened to the chatter from a spirit box, Dudding saw a shadowy figure near a cluster of tombstones. He and his son ducked into the shadows, worried that it might be a security guard. When the figure began to move, it was decidedly not a living being, as it moved through several tombstones and a wrought iron fence. Frightened at their experience, the pair slipped out of the cemetery. Did they encounter the spirit of the bell ringer or the ghosted bride, or was it the spirit of one of the many people who rest here beneath the sod? And then they cited one of my books called Graveyard Ghost Hunting. The search continues. That's some of the things I brought along to read. I could brought lots more stuff, but you can see I'm doing all the time here. I will probably have a drawing on some more of these books right here. We have 5, no, we have 6 left, I think. Did I put out 4 books?
I think so.
So there's still 6 here. Okay, we'll draw on these books and see who gets them. Anybody want to come up and draw on this?
If I can draw, because I'll probably won. So I won't be cheating like some people we know. Jason, go.
There's always put that one out in the library. I haven't seen them wrong.
Bottom pipe.
Can I get this one?
Yes. You get this one on.
All right. Still feel right about it.
Skylar Chapman. He's just in the front row. Is there a Gary Newhart, something like that?
Craig.
Oh. Handwriting. I need to get. Allison Boggs.
This is the last book here.
Last one is Liz. Where'd Liz go?
That's what,
You can get it to her.
I don't know.
Need the winner be present to win?
I think so.
Well,
I think so.
I don't know. You think they need to be present?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it just says Liz, and it could be anybody, right?
All right. Let's do it again.
Sue Ann Charles.
Right there.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
If there's, if anybody wants one, they didn't win one, you can buy one. So I actually have some here, so. And there's 2 or 3 other books up here if anybody wants these. It's not necessary, I brought them along, hold up and so forth, but these are for sale. If anybody's interested in them. Here's a book. This is, I just discovered a picture right down there. This is a book right here that me and my son John back there co-authored called The West Virginia Book of Monsters. There's a lot of work went into this book and a lot of stuff in here. I did the artwork myself and things like that. I'm not an artist. Some artwork's featured in this thing here. John did all the graphics and stuff in the cover. Here's a book I did on Bigfoot in West Virginia. Done a lot of stuff in it. You see, I held up everything. Oh, yes. On my trip into New Orleans and so forth, it caused me to write this book called The Rougarou, Louisiana's Werewolf. There was an encounter I had down there. There's also a lot of discrepancies over the Carson Cornstalk. this book right here. There's a number of historians in Point Pleasant. They are historians and other types of people. And let me see, what we call them, directors of tourism or something like that, and the Chamber of Commerce and so forth, have been trying to deny that there was a cornstalk curse. For some reason, they think it looks bad on the community. And so they're trying to deny that there is a cornstalk curse down there. Well, I lived down there. I was born there in 1950. As I grew up, I constantly heard about the cornstalk's curse. In the very early 50s, my dad was employed at Marietta Manufacturing. He was home one day working in the hayfield, heard an explosion. A barge blew up and killed a bunch of people. Immediately, it was blamed on cornstalk. Silver Bridge collapse was blamed on cornstalk. Every time something happens down there, it's blamed on cornstalk. Major flood, all those kind of things. So I know that I've been hearing that cornstalk curse business for 73 years. But that's not all. It's been around a lot longer than that. Well, the community, a bunch of the people in the community are telling me that when they started the Mothman Festival in 2002, I believe it was, they're telling around that the Mothman enthusiasts made up the cornstalk curse. Okay? And I've been hearing all this, so I decided to do some work on this cornstalk thing. And so finally, they said, well, where did these people get this idea? These Mothman people, where did they get the idea? And they said they finally solved the mystery. In the 1920s, Point Pleasant High School, someone there wrote a play. In that play, they had the Battle of Point Pleasant, Colonel Andrew Lewis and Chief Cornstalk, and they had a reenactment in that play of Cornstalk's murder, and Cornstalk stands up and recites a speech casting a curse on Point Pleasant. They said, that is the earliest. That's about 100 years ago. They said that's where they got this legend from. They said otherwise there's nothing to it. So I decided to do some research. My son worked on it. We put a lot of time in on it, and we discovered that newspapers going way back into the early 1800s discussed the cornstalk curse. And there's things written up in newspapers about how someone would like to maybe start some kind of industry at Point Pleasant, maybe an iron foundry or something. But they said, we're not putting it anywhere that's going to curse. So what north of Mason City, New Haven, those places, put the iron furnace up there. The railroad wants to come through there in the early 1800s, around the mid 1800s. They want to come through there, and they said, no, we're not running a railroad through Point Pleasant because it'll just end up in disaster because of that curse. There's all these newspaper articles about that curse. Then I even get to a preacher's journal from right around 1800 who went there in the last part of the 1700s, and Point Pleasant was nothing but a group of log cabins, and he decides to convert all those people to Christianity and build a church. And he said in there, I spent months there, tried to work with those people and reason with them. He said, I couldn't get anywhere. They wouldn't hear of it. He said, I could not convert them to Christianity, and we couldn't build a church. He said, because those people, it says in his journals that they're some kind of a curse of an Indian named Chief Cornstalk is embedded in their minds. So I traced it all the way back there. And Cornstalk, of course, was murdered in 1777 or whatever. Right after that, that's when they said the curse began. But anyhow, I wrote it up. It's in this book here. I researched that. That's another book there that I've done. Now, I think I'm pretty well done there. Any questions on anything? I've talked continually.
Are all those available on Amazon that you've discussed?
Yes, there's right now there's 63 books. They're all available on Amazon. I also sell them at like Mothman Festival. I'm a vendor there. I'm a vendor at West Virginia Bigfoot Festival over at Sutton. There's several other places I go, and I've done a lot of different appearances in places and so on. They're all on Amazon. They range from like $12. Some are $16. Some of these others are like $20 on Amazon. Yeah, you can get them all on there. We've got a book number 64 coming out here soon. It's already pretty much assembled. I'm working with a friend of mine in Kentucky. He's the curator of his own personal museum, and he's working with me right now. And he's world travel. He's a world traveler. Travels all over the place and investigates all kinds of weird activities. You would not believe the stuff he does. He is right now at this very moment writing on the foreword, and that book, as soon as I get that foreword in my hands within like hours, that book's going to soon become available. And it's on vampires. And there's a story in there where I actually, while in New Orleans working on this book, I'm down on Bourbon Street about 2 o'clock in the morning, which is not a good place to be at that time of night. There's bad stuff going on down there. Daytime, it's different during the daytime. In the evening, it gets worse, but after midnight. Well, I'm down there walking along. John is behind me about 20 feet away, following me. And that's when this weird woman with stringy looking hair, just a real rough looking wrinkled face, really mean looking thing. I don't know, it's something you don't want to run into at night. She grabs a hold of me and says, "Come here." And she jerks me over like this. And I tried to get loose from her. I did jerk loose from her, and she came at me again and grabbed me again. Jerked me back. She said, "Don't ignore me." And it was really a rough thing. And I always follow this rule, but not to look at these people in the face. But I did turn and look her in the face, and she looked at me, and when she stared at me, suddenly her eyes lit up and glowed red. And I jerked loose and took off from her. He was back. He caught up with me at the next street, and we took off and headed back to our hotel, which is just up on the hill. It's kind of like a rise. A hotel called the Brakeman. He went back up there. That was an encounter I had with someone. Well, I told them about that down there, and they said, "You ran into one of our vampires," is what they told me. But it was kind of like a scary thing. I think it shook him up. It shook me up. But it left marks on the arm. When I came back, I showed it to some medical people at Rome General Hospital. And they said they wanted to monitor that. And it took like 2 months worth of black marks on the arm went away.
Were you one of the gentlemen that you were discussing earlier in your speech in there, your talk about that were in the basement of Verona Maple Hall?
Yes.
You were one of them?
With me was Lee Harbert and Dennis Lively. We called him Doc. He was a medical impersonator, you might say. Matter of fact, he did impersonate several types of things, including physicians, hospital administrators, everything else later on. These guys are died. They're all dead. I'm the only one left.
How long did your friend pretend to be I'm kind of curious about that. How long did that go on?
I went on for years, and I hadn't talked to him for quite a few years, and I was in Wheeling, and a friend of mine up there who's a doctor, he said, I believe I know him. He said, he's the administrator over at this hospital in Moundsville. So I called the hospital in Moundsville and asked if he was there. And I said, is he here? They said, sure. They said, he's our administrator. And they put him on the phone. I talked to him. And he said, come on over and we'll go to dinner or something like this. I'll put it on my expense account. He worked as a, he started as an orderly. And then he moved into physical therapy and was helping them. And then he went to another hospital and worked as a physical therapist. Then he went to another hospital and worked as the administrator. And so a few years ago, right before he died, I had been trying to locate him. He seemed to be off the grid, but I finally located his house. So one evening I had to be in the area. I swung over by his house. He was shook up when I arrived, though, to see me because his wife was there. And his wife asked me, how do you know my husband? And I said, we went to college together, and he was stuttering around trying to, get her on to something else. Well, I realized that he didn't want her to find out from me anything. He's married to a woman, she had a really good job, 6-figure salary. But he didn't want her to know anything about me or anything about this guy. And anyhow, if I checked the research, he was supposed to have had a medical degree from Florida State University or something. And she thinks he went to Florida State University. The only college he had ever been in was here. He did not graduate here. But he did.
Is that when you discovered what you've been doing, or did you sort of know
No,
you've been
I
carrying
just,
on like
I'd
that for
heard,
a while?
I'd heard stuff going on for a long time. Very strange.
That's the story.
It's a strange story.
Yeah.
That's why he went with the name of Doc. My understanding that even during his high school days, he worked as an orderly in a hospital up around Payton City, somewhere up in there, up in the northern part of Ohio, across the river. And wore white pants, white coat, and stuff like that. And he even came to school dressed like that occasionally because he was going to go to work. And everybody called him Doc. And we called him Doc Lively. He's been dead several years. But
And he never got found out?
no, I don't think so. But I'll tell you, he was a genius at what he could do. He was good.
Better than you need to be.
There was something there about him. But his last job was he was running a home health service. That was the last thing he was doing. He was running a home health service, and they had all these people in vans and stuff that went out and took oxygen and then hospital beds to people and set it up. He had like nurses employed and all this kind of stuff. He was the director of that. He did that for a long time. Yeah, he did that for a while. His wife was manager of a Walmart supercenter.
Well, let's give George another round of applause here. He'll be around for a little while longer, and everybody can ask questions and things. But we've had him up here for an hour, and I don't want to make him stand for much longer. Please. Thanks
I'm
everybody
used
for
to it.
showing.
I delivered a calculus lecture for 2 hours once. So.